What's up, everybody? Today we're going to talk about how studying the works of Aristotle, a man who lived back in around 450 BC, can greatly affect and help you with your advertising. Now, you might be wondering why. How does a guy 450 BC have anything to do with today? Well, Aristotle, as you may know, was a man who was the student of Plato and the instructor of Alexander the Great. And he came up in a discussion with a good friend of mine, Harvey, who's actually a Hollywood screenwriter and part of the Screen Actors Guild, mentioned that if you want to learn about storytelling and how it relates to ads, you should study this book called The Poetics by Aristotle. And I sat there and I'm like, what are you talking about? How does a guy 450 BC have anything to do with today? And he explained to me is that Aristotle actually wrote the book Poetics, and in that book Poetics he discussed the structure of how you should make a story. Okay? Now, why would somebody back in 450 BC, who was a great philosopher, have anything to do with storytelling? And it took me actually a good chunk of a year to figure it out. And when I realized what it was is that back in the day, in the 450 BC, there was no internet, there's no television, there's no radio, there was no stereo, iPod, iPad, any of those things for entertainment. And actually no printed media, actually, okay? So if the government wanted to control people or communicate with people, they had to build a great network of theaters. So if you go to Greece or Italy, any of that area in the Mediterranean, when you go on a tour, you go to these ruins, and you find out in these ruins, there's a whole bunch of a network basically of outdoor theaters made with stone, just like this. That's why I'm standing here. Okay, they carved out stone. You may have seen it, like the big old theaters in Italy. And so my point is, it costs a great expense to make these things. Okay, I mean, these are huge assemblies of hand-carved stone and architecture, and they had to drag these stones miles and miles and miles to the point of when they assemble these things. So you know it had to be of huge value. And when you think about it, I said the word internet at the beginning. The internet also is a massive conduit of information for either to be social control, entertainment, communication, whatever. That's all our ancestors had in 450 BC at that time. They had theaters. Now, to be able to get people to the theater, you had to create stories that would entertain and inform. Now, of course, back then, because they didn't have hardly any media, they had to train people on how to do this, how to make a great story. So what do? You go to the best mind at the time. And arguably, Aristotle is one of the best minds ever in human history. I mean, he has a great impact on math. Actually, all the computers are based on Aristotelian logic, the bits and things like that, truth and falsehood. So his ideas have stood all this time. Now, why would a great mind be doing that? And you think about it throughout history, when we had communication revolutions, whether it's going from the theater, the printing press, you had Gutenberg, and then now you have the Zuckerbergs, you had who did Facebook, you have Page and Brin who did Google, you had Jerry Yang and David Filo who did Yahoo. The best minds of every era who create revolutions in communications they're at the forefront. So Aristotle, back at 450 BC or so, is equivalent to those people. Okay, even you can mention Steve Jobs because he made all the iPhones we all have, pretty much, right? Many of us have. So let's go back to now the story of the Poetics. Okay, in the Poetics, Aristotle described a few things. He described the story structure, that every story should have a beginning, a middle, and the end. And they had some canonical trajectories or story arcs, like maybe going after a villain, or maybe going on a big journey. And there was like roughly about 7 of them at the time, and we'll go through that in a later video. And the reason this is important is because you had the best mind who understood people, their psychology, and understood that throughout human history, because we didn't have movies and we didn't have television and novels and whatever, all of our education from generation to generation to generation that depended on our survival in terms of how to farm, medicine, or even how to get along with our other enemies or even friends, had to come through word of mouth by telling stories. So our brains, they're wired for stories, to receive stories. And because of that, when you tell a story, generally speaking, people are less resistant to the message than if you give them a plain sales pitch, okay? So somehow when you tell a good story, it opens up the mind. And when it opens up the mind, a person's less combative with the new ideas. Okay, you can actually communicate a story as long as it's truthful, or in some cases it'd be fiction, but I don't mean in terms of lies, but just for entertainment, and a person will receive it and internalize it. And if that message contains, because you may be interested in, of course, marketing or selling your product, embedding reasons why they should consider your product, or why not consider your competition, or why just consider the whole market segment in general, and the function or need of something, you can put that in there too. Okay, that's how you do the storytelling. So that kind of leaves the framework of why a person like Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers and mathematicians, in history, has anything to do with the storytelling. So most likely he was hired. I don't know this for sure, but he was most likely hired or encouraged by maybe perhaps the government to create a body of work to train legions of new storytellers, or equivalent to our screenwriters today, or authors of books, so that people like the government or people who are engaged in commerce would want to be able to attract people to a message and get them to act. Now, that's where I'm going with this is now, we talked about a structure, beginning, middle, and end. So if you're writing an ad, okay, you want to have the three components that mirror beginning, middle, and end. And that is your hook, your story, and your offer. Okay? So your hook, the whole point of a hook is right now is they have their social media, they get their phones out, okay? And now they're going through Facebook and they're scrolling, I think, several hundred feet a day. So if you're trying to sell something or get people's attention, you're going through several hundred feet a day of scroll, you better have something that's really compelling, that grabs a person's attention. Now you do that by having a very striking image, bright colors, contrast, well composed, easy to see, not too busy. Okay, maybe one subject perhaps, and even a color that distances itself from the color of the social media platform, like Facebook's got basically blue and white, so you may have a red or a green popping out of there. And then you have a headline that catches a person's attention. Now the hook, the point of it again is to stop someone from scrolling and look at your stuff. So it's got to be the analogy is like if you're going into walking in Times Square in New York City and it's crowded, right? You have all the neon signs going, you got people, doing things, and the food everywhere, people are eating stuff, and it's just a lot of distraction. So the whole point is it's like this. You're walking down Times Square, and you see someone coming at you, right? They're coming at you, and you want to get their attention. You got to say something, like, "Oh my God, that building's on fire," or "How would you like a free ticket to Les Miserables," or whatever, to stop them. And they go, "What did you say?" You got to get them walking, and you got to get them to turn and go, "What did you say?" That's grabbing someone's attention. Now the offer at the end is clearly something more like what you're trying to sell or an idea you're trying to get to. So the story is the bridge between the hook and the offer. It could be anything. You can let your mind go on that. You may want to have one of the 7 structures. We mentioned that Aristotle had basically 7 or so story arcs, going on an adventure, getting after the bad guy, the villain, going after the villain, or rags to riches, and so on and so forth. We'll get to it in another video. Those are story arcs that you could put in between the hook and the offer. Okay? It could be long and it could be short. It really, generally speaking, when it comes to advertising, the more expensive the offer, or the more difficult the offer is to understand, the longer it has to be. Okay. Now, if you're selling something for $1 or $2, you don't frankly want to spend a person's time, so you're gonna make it short. It could be a few lines, get this here, it's a discount, this is better than the other person, whatever it is, something humorous, anything goes. But if you're gonna be selling something like a coaching program for $5,000 or $10,000, and they don't even know who you are, you're probably gonna have a longer set of copy from start to finish, or a video, at least to get them to click. Now, what you're selling in the offer, let's say in the Facebook ad, you're really not trying to sell the whole thing you're selling at the end goal, the $10,000 program or the car or whatever necessarily. What you want to do is sell the click from the ad to go to your landing page. Okay, you want to make sure that you get them engaged enough in that you get their attention in the hook, you get them engaged and indoctrinated with your belief, let's say, in the story, enough to say, you know what, I'm willing to click. Maybe the click is just a click to go to the link, or maybe it's a click to go into a lead generation section of a form, for example, to put their name, phone number, and email address if necessary. Okay? So that's it we have for today. And later in another post, we'll be talking about the 7 story arcs. And there's actually some more than that. Okay? Until next time, guys, I'll see you later. And if you like this, please hit the like button. It gives me some feedback so I can make more videos like this, and I appreciate it. Thanks very much.